While buses are typically a common sight on our roads, some visionary designers have pushed the boundaries of innovation and creativity, resulting in bus designs that are far from ordinary. From buses that can traverse water to those with mind-boggling shapes and functions, these unconventional transit vehicles are bound to pique your curiosity and challenge your perception of what a bus looks like. Here are the top 15 weirdest bus designs in the world. Starting with number 15, the drag race bus. While it may look a little crazy, the so-called cool bus is a school bus that has been souped up with new parts to allow it to drag race. And while it may be a tad bit too dangerous to see any use on the road, it would certainly help get students to school on time. Number 14, the Kelekona flying bus. Now, despite sounding ultra-futuristic, a company known as Kelekona is working on what is essentially a flying bus. Known as an eVTOL, this fully electric bus will be drone-controlled, resemble a flying saucer, and be able to fit up to 40 people on board. Now, according to the company, they'll be able to reach speeds of up to 200 miles an hour and will generally be used to go between cities and should be ready to debut sometime in 2024. Number 13, the DAF Super City train buses. While the Congo might not be the first place that comes to mind when you think of public transport, the Central African country has the distinction of being home to the longest bus in the world. Known as the DAF Super City train bus, it is an incredible 32 meters long and has enough space to comfortably hold 350 people, making it the perfect vehicle for busy public transit routes. Number 12, rail bus. While passenger trains may be a common way to get around, in the 1930s, a new concept known as the rail bus began to pick up steam. Now, in essence, a rail bus is a cross between a train and a bus. After all, while they typically retain a bus body and have 4 wheels on a fixed base, they're designed to run on railway tracks. And while they may not be as common as regular passenger trains, they still see use on little-used railway lines in countries such as Germany, Italy, France, the United Kingdom, and Sweden. Number 11, Ukrainian Raptors. As part of the war effort against Russia, Ukraine has made use of what are now being called Ukrainian Raptors. While several versions exist, they're all based on 6-wheeled Kraz trucks. The only difference is that they're covered in armored glass and plates that can be armed to the nines. Capable of stopping a 7.62mm round of ammunition and protecting against 6-kilogram landmines, they are absolute units on the battlefield. Since they got enough room for up to 24 soldiers and gun ports for about 12, they can be used for all sorts of missions, while their additional feature of interior heating and air conditioning allows soldiers to be comfortable in all climates. Number 10, the Grand Arctic 300. Volvo is one of the world's most respected vehicle makers, and so it makes sense that this beloved Swedish firm is behind the world's largest bus. Known as the Grand Arctic 300, it was entirely developed in Brazil and what is called a biarticulated bus. This means that it has 2 bendy parts connecting 3 passenger carrying sections and comes in at a whopping 30 meters in length. All of this size will allow it to carry up to 300 passengers in one ride. Now, while this should in theory make it quite efficient, it is very large and therefore difficult to drive on regular roads. As a result, it's probably for the best that it's especially designed to be used in Rio de Janeiro's dedicated bus lanes, saving it from the awful traffic and narrow roads that can be found in the area. And while it certainly wasn't easy to replace the buses on this line, this thing carries up to 30% more passengers than previously biarticulated buses, making it far more efficient. In fact, according to Fabiano Todeschini of Volvo Bus Latin America, quote, "This vehicle will provide more efficient transportation systems, offering a higher quality for the passengers and improved cost efficiency for the transport operators," end quote. Well, in any case, the Grand Arctic 300's immense size makes it the largest bus in the world, and truly an incredible sight. Number 9, the Boeing 727 Jet Limo. While designed for use as a limo, this super strange vehicle makes use of a bus in order to operate. You see, back in 2004, Mexican limo company Vaca Limousines had a crazy idea to create a plain limo. In essence, they attached half of a Boeing 727 jet to a Mercedes bus, and the end result was somehow a fully functioning limousine. Despite being 16 meters long and weighing 22 tons, it was completely street legal and is able to reach speeds of up to 200 kilometers an hour. Its interior is also super luxurious. At the front, the vehicle has maintained its plain cockpit, allowing you to feel like you're high up in the clouds. It also has enough space for 40 people and features a sunken lounge and living room, a large television, bathroom, full bar, and of course a fireplace. If you're looking to party, the limousine also features strobe lights, ceiling mirrors, and a fog machine, allowing you to celebrate in an early 2000s-esque way. Best of all, at the back there's even a heart-shaped bed and an infinity mirror, allowing you to unwind and relax whenever you please. In other words, the entire thing is a drivable rolling club for a party for 40 that also offers the possibility to sleep inside. Yet despite looking absolutely ridiculous, its creators would lease it out for 3 hours at a rate of $1,000 an hour. This went on for a while until in 2007 it was listed on eBay and soon snapped up by a certain Limo Bob of California. He forked over $275,000 for it and continues to rent it out. However, if you've got deep pockets, he's also interested in buyers and he's willing to sell it for a sum of about $1 million. Number 8. The Rhino Runner Armored Bus. Working in an active war zone is anything but safe, but taking a ride inside of a Rhino Runner armored bus certainly increases your chance of survival in case things get hairy. Manufactured by the Armor Group, the Rhino Runner is designed to protect its occupants from small arms fire, armor-piercing rounds, roadside bombs, and IED attacks. While suitable on many terrains, it saw the most use by the U.S. Army in the hot, arid, and often rugged environments of Iraq and Afghanistan, and was generally used to bring civilian contractors, armed forces, VIPs, and prisoners from point A to point B. In fact, it was this exact bus that was used to transport Saddam Hussein for prosecution by the Iraqi Special Tribunal. This type of action is possible thanks to the bus's high-tech design. Built on either a 4x4 or 6x6 chassis, it can be configured to house between 19 to 40 passengers, and can house even a mobile command and control center or hospital if desired. To keep everyone on board safe, the bus has gun ports to allow the troops to fire their individual weapons from inside. And in case things get really hairy, the bus has run-flat tires, super strong composite armor, and top-of-the-line Rhino glass to protect against practically any threat. In total, there are more than 50 Rhino Runner buses in the American arsenal, and in all likelihood they'll be sticking around for the foreseeable future. It's also worth noting that these buses have also proven their effectiveness in the field. One of the most notable incidents involving a suicide bomber driving a vehicle loaded with 115 kilograms of explosives. The bomber had exploded his vehicle in between 2 Rhino Runner buses. Yet despite the explosion, the 17 passengers in the first bus and the driver aboard the second all escaped without injuries. Moving on to number 7. Hover buses. While hover buses may sound like something out of a sci-fi movie, they've been put forward as a method to deal with booming populations in cities. Also known as gyro cars, the idea behind them is to build big, disc-shaped buses that can balance on narrow legs and cruise right over lanes of traffic. Equipped with powerful gyroscopes, the idea is that these vehicles would be able to maintain their balance and act a lot like monorails, and since they can easily mesh with traffic, they should be able to provide passengers with a smooth and safe ride without adding to existing congestion. Thanks to solar panels on the top, they should be able to exist without any outside power and never stop spinning, making them a very green solution. As you might expect though, setting up hover bus infrastructure ain't cheap, and to date, China's been the only country to give it a serious shake, only for it to end in disaster. You see, in 2017, there was a plan to create a hover bus above the traffic of the Chinese city of Qinhuangdao, known as the Transit Elevated Bus. Once complete, it did roll up and down the street a few times. However, it didn't take long for it to be abandoned in the middle of the street. After an investigation, it was uncovered that the entire thing was a scam. The company behind the project was raided by police. In July of 2017, 32 people involved with the project were detained by Chinese authorities on suspicion of investment fraud, and to date, the idea has not resurfaced in China. Yet despite this disappointment, in theory, hover buses do sound like a pretty good idea, and I just hope that one day enough funding and willpower can be put behind the concept to truly get it off the ground and running. Or should I say hovering. Number 6. Duck Tours. For years, amphibious tour buses have been a popular way of shuttling around tourists. It's also known as duck tours. They first began to make a splash in 1946 after they were invented by Mel Flath and Bob Unger of Wisconsin Dells. Ever since, they've exploded in popularity and have proven to be a clever use of surplus amphibious vehicles that may otherwise be left to rust. Best of all, these creative boats tend to be painted yellow and given fun design features, making them a few steps up from your typical tour bus. However, this doesn't necessarily mean that joining a duck tour is a good idea. That's because duck tours are famous for having terrible safety records. You see, many duck tour boats are based off the World War II era Duck W. Now, these were meant to be used to land troops on beach fronts and move through rough terrain. In other words, they were never meant to go anywhere near public roadways. As a result, they have design flaws in that they often have many blind spots, making them dangerous to drive on land. To make matters worse, they exist in a regulatory gray area. Since they can be used both on land and in the water, it's often difficult to determine who exactly has authority over licensing and investigating them, and this has caused many dangerous duck boats to fall through the cracks. This can be especially problematic on the water. After all, they tend to have a low freeboard, which makes them vulnerable to rapid sinking in poor weather. Additionally, the canopies often trap passengers on board as the boat sinks, lending to increased fatalities. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, the duck boats also tend to be very old, therefore making them difficult to repair and maintain. As a result, certain localities have special rules surrounding them, while others have complete bans. Yet, generally speaking, many places have not addressed them in any significant way, and as a result, they've continued to be hazardous and unregulated. Therefore, while a tour on one of these amphibious buses would certainly be cool, there's definitely a certain element of risk you take when getting on one. Number 5. Wind-powered bus. Portland. It's one of America's greenest cities, and so it makes sense that it's behind a push to create a new public transit bus that are not only electric, but powered by, of all things, wind energy. Believed to be the first bus service to operate an electric bus on 100% renewable energy, they are starting small with just 5 buses, but the hope is that over 20 years, their nearing 700-strong fleet of buses will become fully electric. The first bus in particular is currently being test run on a relatively difficult, hilly 42-kilometer-long route, and the idea is if that they can do well here, they can do well anywhere. In terms of driver controls, they're much like those on any normal bus and include typical speedometer and hydraulic systems. However, there are some small things such as a touchscreen that monitors battery charge and other parameters and a safety switch that activates the automated charging system. It's also quieter than a normal bus, making them a smaller contributor to noise pollution. And unlike the high cost of diesel, the Transit Commission pays just $228 a month per bus in electricity costs. Over the lifespan of a single vehicle, the Transit Commission also believes that these buses will save about $400,000 in fuel costs and $125,000 in maintenance costs. Of course, this doesn't mean that these buses are perfectly cost-effective. After all, the upfront costs of an electric bus are about double that of a diesel bus. Although the Transit Commission has stated that they hope over their 20-year plan, the costs of these buses will decrease as technology matures and economies of scale come into play. Thankfully, federal grants should also speed things along, as already the Federal Transit Administration's Low and No Emission, or Low-No, vehicle deployment program has paid for 4 of the 5 electric buses being used by the city. Best of all, Portland has also become one of the first cities in the United States to introduce electric school buses to its fleet. And as such, I wouldn't be surprised if Portland is the first American city to one day have fully electric public transportation. Number 4. The Torsus Petoran. Alright, now generally speaking, buses use public roads to get passengers from point A to point B. However, the Torsus Petoran is the perfect bus to use if you're planning on ferrying passengers around an active war zone. Built in Slovakia, the Torsus Petoran is able to carry up to 35 occupants and is essentially a combination of a bus and an off-road truck. Using a heavy-duty manned chassis, 4-wheel drive, and 6-cylinder 290-horsepower diesel engine, Torsus claims it can climb a 33-degree incline and wade through water up to a meter deep. Now, this is pretty incredible when you consider the fact that when fully loaded, it weighs an astonishing 13,000 kilograms. While its specs are impressive, what makes the Petoran truly incredible are its features. For example, it has air conditioning system that's been thoroughly tested in environments as hot as Australia's Great Sandy Desert. Now, Torsus claims that the system is so powerful that it can reduce temperature in the cabin from 60 degrees Celsius to 29 degrees Celsius in just 3 minutes and down to 20 degrees in under 15 minutes, even when fully loaded with people. The same system can also provide additional cooling to the engine in harsh situations, such as when the bus is climbing sand dunes. And best of all, in colder conditions, the bus also has a similarly powerful heating system and insulation setup that's designed for Arctic conditions. There are also some more minor features that are also quite useful, while these change year after year at the moment. Some of the most interesting including a power-operated door that incorporates pneumatic footsteps, an automatic fire suppression system for the 300-liter fuel tank, and an underhood area and top-of-the-line media and speaker system. In any case, the Torsus Petoran has been on sale since 2018, and as you might expect, it's mainly used for both industrial and military purposes. In fact, Petoran has many configurations, with these ranging from a simple bus to what Torsus calls, quote, the command center. If you've really got a lot of cash to spend, you can maybe even outfit them for overland camping, making them a great toy for millionaires with too much money on their hands. However, at a price of between $185 to $445 grand, depending on the setup, they aren't cheap. And unfortunately, they're not yet federalized for sale in the United States. Number 3. Further. The 1960s was a time of peace, love, and psychedelics, and few people knew that better than the folks aboard Further. You see, Further got its start when a certain Ken Kesey and his group of so-called merry pranksters made it their mission to travel from Northern California to New York in order to celebrate both the Broadway opening of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which was based on Ken Kesey's 1962 novel, and the 1964 New York World's Fair. Taking inspiration from Jack Kerouac's 1957 novel On the Road, he assembled a team and got moving. But soon, Ken realized that he didn't have enough room in his station wagon to fit everyone. So, he bought a retired 1939 International Harvester school bus for $1,200, added bunks, a bathroom, a kitchen with a refrigerator, and a stove, and got driving. Over time, customizations were added, with these including a generator, a sound system, an interior and exterior intercom, a railing and seating platform on top of the bus, and an observational turret. However, the most iconic addition was the paint job done by the pranksters at various points during the trip. You see, all of them were taking LSD during their journey, and it was under the influence of this drug that they made countless psychedelic, colorful designs. In any case, despite occasionally breaking down, the bus made it to its destination in New York, and from then on it would further see use until, rather fittingly, it had its last ride on a trip to the legendary Woodstock Festival in 1969. However, by this point in time, the bus was in decline, and after the festival, Ken brought the bus to Oregon, where he was raising a family and teaching at the University of Oregon. While a second version of Further was created in the late 1980s, the original bus was resigned to the so-called swamp, which was a wet, low-lying area behind the Kesey family farm. Overgrown by weeds and surrendered to the wild, the bus remained in the swamp until October 2005, when a group of about 30 pranksters, family, and devoted fans cut away the blackberry vines and trees that had overtaken it and pulled it free. Ever since, they've been trying to restore the rusted away and rotted bus. However, due to the lack of funds, this process is still undergoing to this very day. While it may be sad to see Further in such a state of disrepair, it is nevertheless a symbol of the hippie culture of the 1960s and an art piece that attests to the hope for significant social and political change during that time period. Number 2. The Citroën U55 Cityrama Cirrus. In 1956, newly founded city tour operator Cityrama went to coach building company Cirrus and made a wild request. They were a startup in Paris, and so in order to stand apart, they wanted a bus that met 3 requirements. 1. It had to be a double-decker. 2. They needed passengers to have a panoramic view. And 3. The design could absolutely not resemble any other tour bus. Now, based on those requirements, Cirrus technical director Albert Lemaitre got to work, and the end result was a bus that is one of the strangest in history. Built on the Citroën Type 55 chassis, the design of its body was inspired by the hulls of the excursion boats that sailed on the Seine. This led to it having 2 tail fins, and a curved plexiglass structure surrounded the 2 passenger decks. In case this wasn't enough to grab your attention, it also had a large red decorative stripe over the entire length of the vehicle, and a tailpipe that stretched as a large arch over both bus decks. For its time, it was also rather high-tech. After all, each seat had a pair of headphones that provided a guided tour during the journey, with this guide being available in 8 different languages that could be changed at the push of a button. Thankfully for Cityrama, the design worked. Tourists flocked to ride in this unique eye-catching bus, and they were such a huge success that Cityrama commissioned multiple copies. However, beyond the publicity, it turned out that the design wasn't all that practical. You see, when exposed to sunlight, the non-air-conditioned glass structure of the bus acted like a greenhouse, making the ride extremely uncomfortable. While the top of the bus could be opened up on hot days, it did little to regulate the temperature, making a tour on this bus an uncomfortable experience that many would just do one time. Beyond the passenger experience, the design also had mechanical issues. You see, the original vehicle design was not able to sufficiently cool the engine, and while coolers were added and radiator grills were added too, one of the buses still managed to catch fire and burn. Thankfully, nobody was injured. Due to these issues, Cityrama opted to not order any more of these vehicles of this type after the last bus was delivered in 1959. Instead, a completely newly designed successor double-decker based on the Savium Chausson SC1 was ordered. This design was far more conventional, marking an end to Cityrama's quest to ditch conformity. Despite all this, the strange Cirrus buses remained in use at Cityrama for decades, and as a result, it became ingrained into Parisian culture. In fact, the last bus was not retired until 1980. And while most have been lost, 2 are still in existence, and 1 is currently undergoing restoration. Number 1. Double-decker buses. While they may be a bit strange, few vehicles are quite as loved or iconic as the double-decker bus. Consisting of 2 stories, they are a super efficient way to get a lot of people around without wasting precious road space, making them popular around the world. While these incredible buses are most commonly associated with the streets of London, they actually got their start in Paris. In 1828, the first double-decker bus was a 2-level horse-drawn carriage that would trod through Paris's streets. Inspired by its success, an Englishman named George Chilibert used the concept to bring the omnibus to London. This bus would cost 1 shilling to ride and could fit up to 22 people, making it an innovation in the London transportation scene. However, it wasn't until the 1920s that the first engine-powered version of the double-decker bus made its debut. With a growing population, there was a desperate need for more buses, sparking competition amongst the many companies in the city. By the mid-1920s, about 20 different bus companies were in operation. In a bid to differentiate themselves, the London General Omnibus Company, or LGOC, made the wise decision to not only have double-decker buses, but paint them bright red. When the LGOC merged together with other bus companies to become part of the collective London Passenger Transport Board in the 1930s, they adopted this red color, and the red double-decker buses have been the standard in the city ever since. In 1956, double-decker buses were given a fresh gust of air with the creation of an all-new Route Master. Similar to the double-decker buses that we're familiar with today, they were an innovation at the time. After all, despite being nearly a ton lighter than previous vehicles, these vehicles seated 64 people rather than 56. This was possible because they used lightweight aluminum and building techniques invented when producing aircraft during World War II. The Route Master was also innovative in its use of independent front suspension, power steering, and a fully automatic gearbox, plus power hydraulic braking, making it far easier to drive when compared to older designs. Unfortunately, some initial features had to be removed. After all, the buses used to have a rear door entrance that people would jump off and on while the bus was moving. Yet, these hitches aside, the great capacity, efficiency, and relatively compact size of the buses made them wildly successful. Ever since, double-decker buses have spread around the world and can be found in cities such as Hong Kong, Rome, Paris, and Vancouver. Interestingly, there's also been an effort to create triple-decker buses. These should, in theory, be able to hold even more people, making them even more efficient. However, the reality is that their high center of gravity often leads to instability, and due to their height, there is a risk of them hitting trees, bridges, or power lines on many routes. And while they have seen limited usage in some places, and most famously as a movie prop in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, consensus in most places is that for more practical uses, they are simply not worth the headache. I'll see you guys next time. Watch our Vehicles playlist for more top 15 videos about amazing vehicles. Sit back, relax, and binge watch all of our best vehicle videos. Thank you to our channel members.